right, good afternoon and welcome to CQ Roll Call's Advocacy Webinar Series. I'm Susanna Cagle, the Product Manager of Advocacy Software here at CQ Roll Call. I'm joined today by Andrew Fullerton, Government Relations Manager at the National Kidney Foundation, and a regular speaker on our webinar series, Josh Shabursky, Senior Manager of Grassroots Advocacy at the American Diabetes Association and founder of the Grassroots Professional Network here in DC. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. I'm excited to talk with everyone today about Lobby Day best practices. 'Tis the season of Lobby Days. I know a couple of people in this room have just finished their Lobby Day. So what we're going to do is briefly talk about some tips and tricks that apply to small and large organizations alike, as well as some more specific ideas on how to run your Lobby Day depending on who you are as an organization. Before Andrew and Josh get started, I want to let all of our viewers know that there's no need to write down all of the great resources that are going to be mentioned here today. We will send you all a copy of today's presentation as well as a recording of this discussion for anything you missed. So before we get started, let's just talk briefly about what is a Lobby Day and kind of the history behind the concept. So Lobby or Hill Days are usually an annual event when organizations fly into DC and have their members meet with elected officials and legislative staff to advocate and explain support for specific legislation relevant to their organization. So this is a long-standing practice really rooted in America, as well as our concepts of who we identify ourselves as citizens. So I'm very excited to hear kind of what you all have to say about the best ways to do this, because it's always nice to know how to do this better as an organization and as an individual. So why don't we get started?
So just to start it off, Lobby Days are not just a single day itself. It's several months of preparation and, it's the Super Bowl for us in grassroots advocacy. It's the big day. The next day is, you rest and relax a little bit because you got through the triumphant march on the Hill. So this preparation, will go for a few months before that. One of the first decisions you have to make is how to acquire your advocates for the Lobby Day itself. And there's, one of two ways of doing this, either through an invite or a application process. And I think a few things to consider are the scale, the quality of advocates, who and what members you're targeting, and, to also consider the factors of prestige and adaptability when considering an application versus an invite. For our larger scale Lobby Day, we do an application process, and we, we'll vet through 1,000 or so applicants and see, where does everybody fit in, match it to district, and look at stuff like that. For our more intimate Lobby Day, which we just finished last Thursday, they were almost our grass tops people, very seasoned, knowledgeable, having done it for a number of years, participated in the larger Lobby Day, and they were sent a formal invitation because we knew that they would be right for this type of event.
Gotcha. So question about the grass tops kind of history there versus the people that apply. What about the kind of level of experience that you look for at a state or a local level to kind of think about giving these people an invitation? Is it particularly federal history, or do you also look at state and local level history of advocacy as well?
I think it's a lot of different factors that come into play, even if it's answering an email action alert. If you answer every single action alert for an organization, you're automatically flagged as someone that's interested in the topic. If you're talking about it on social media, if you are attending events, another part of advocacy is just being involved in the organization and the nonprofit as a whole. So you might be attending a walk or a bike event and also taking action on those advocacy alerts, but you're vested in the organization, and we know that you'll represent it in front of Congress well.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate the recruitment from other activities within the organization. Maybe someone, in our case, works with living donor programs, or they're heavily invested in our walk and fundraising efforts. Frankly, if someone's willing to do fundraising, they're probably going to find what we ask them to do much easier.
That makes a lot of sense as well. Fundraising is a painful and valuable experience for all of us. All right, I'm really excited about this next slide, so do tell.
So, this kind of a war story from last week, great experience with our lobby day, the American Diabetes Association. We partnered with a lot of NFL players, professional football players, as well as, people that were veterans of the league, as well as a few college recruits. And we were proud to say that we had 34 professional athletes on the Hill, almost every team, part of a larger initiative, but this was really the crowning point to launch this initiative. So pictured there is myself with Reggie Ragland from the University of Alabama, linebacker, and he'll be a first-round draft pick this year. And we visited Senator Sessions and talked about diabetes. So really the do's and don'ts of working with celebrities is treat them as a colleague, treat them as an informed advocate, as a professional. Make sure that they have a clear purpose. It's not just that they're there because they can get a lot of attention. They need to be vested in the cause and the issue and have a personal connection. When we went into those meetings, Reggie talked about his family and his connection with diabetes and related as a regular constituent to the staff that he was interested in diabetes, and that's why they need to take these actions to address this problem. So, make sure also that the advocates that go every year are the center of attention. This was the first year where we had this professional football player partnership. We may have brought one or two celebrities to the Hill with a personal connection in the past, but this was the largest scale. But at the end of the day, we made sure that our advocates were the center of attention, and they were the ones that would convey their story this year and next year and many years to come. So it's really all about the personal story, whether it's a celebrity or a regular advocate.
Absolutely.
The training of advocates, I think, is one of the hardest things you can do because you have so many different people, different stages of life, different interests, different amount of time they have available. But it really is, I think, the most important thing in a fly-in. And I think the key to it is training your advocates over time. You can't just have them come in, dump them in a room for a morning and say, this is your training and you're done.
Right.
You train them periodically over a case of, let's say, 2 months. You have 2 or 3 webinars, for example, conference calls. That way you can disseminate information, train them, answer questions over time, get them comfortable with the process, especially if they're not repeat fly-in participants.
Absolutely.
You need to have accessible information for them. I was looking at, Alzheimer's, they did a fly-in recently, and they have a fabulous website to be dedicated to that. And having something that you can put all the materials on for your advocates to get to. That's not really their purpose, I think, but something internal, but behind a password-protected login. That way they can see everything. They can look over it over time at any time they want. They don't have to go find your email, for example.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So kind of talk to me about some of the ways to give your advocates kind of the day of pep talk to kind of get them fired up to go to the Hill, because I know, a lot of this is about training and in some cases muscle memory about, the statistics and the facts and the bills that you want to talk about, but the other bits of it are just making sure that they don't forget enthusiasm in the mix of trying to remember everything.
I mean, a lot of that is about getting your people together for the breakfast in the morning and speaking with them. Maybe you have someone who is either a really key advocate for the group or a VIP speak to them and reinforce the importance of this. You do the same thing at the end of the day. You talk about the stories. You let them share what happened to them that day, because that makes everyone feel much more comfortable if you have a second day of a fly-in on the Hill, but also about their own experience that day, so they're more likely to come back. They can say, oh, it wasn't just me that had that stone-faced Hill staffer. It was 6 other people in this room had meetings like that, so I didn't screw up.
Right. No, that's good news to know. So speaking of breakfast and managing schedules.
Yeah, I am a fan of paid consultants helping you schedule. I don't know about anyone else in this room, but when you have 100, 200, I think I've heard of a 1,600 person fly-in.
Wow.
One of the doctor groups does. That's a little too much for one person to handle, even if you had a fleet of interns working with you. You would need the size of the U.S. Navy to handle that. I mean, let's be honest here.
Right.
It's a lot of time and effort to send out all of the emails to schedulers, to follow up on all of them, to do all of the 1,001 things you have to do to get your people scheduled, especially to press for meetings with members or senators.
Yeah.
Having a scheduler consultant is a fantastic resource because it frees your time to do all those other things that you can do, so you don't have that months of preparation and 10 days of panic right beforehand. But just remember that you can't assume your scheduler is going to do everything correctly no matter how good they are. You should always need to double check their work because they're people and they're going to make some error, and it's always better to make sure you catch those early.
Yeah.
The other nice thing about consultants is they can also help with the day of scheduling. So if a member's office comes and says, oh, we've got to reschedule to another time, or we have to cancel, or so-and-so staffer can't make it, someone else is going to replace them. They can handle all those push notifications through your app or through email, through text message, so that you don't have to do that when you're walking with one of your groups or you're in the command center with people and you're trying to manage activities.
Right. I know we're about to you mentioned an app, we're about to get into the fundamentals of technology and when you need it. But just sitting back here for a second and talking about paid consultancy, what do you all think is kind of the hard and fast rule when it comes to when you might need a consultant? I know some of our listeners might not quite be at the point where they're thinking about a consultant. Some of them might be like, well, I could use one, but I think I can still handle it. What do you all think is kind of a good indication of when you should start going the paid route?
How much time are you spending scheduling? If it's really a time sink, I think it's a good idea to consider it. If you're doing a really small fly-in, though, or you're having your advocates schedule for you, maybe you don't need it.
So we're maybe talking like 75 people and less, fine. But more than that, maybe it might be time to kind of go the pro route.
I think sometimes it's beneficial to have outside assistance for, for instance, a speaking engagement at your breakfast. You want to have someone that's important, that's influential. For our recent lobby day, we had district policy group, and they did a wonderful job talking about that, the basics of a lobby day. And for our training and our role play, we had former Congressman Phil Gingrey. So he did a wonderful job. And that was just an example of leveraging consultants where it was very beneficial for the advocates as well as the players because they had a lot of experience and notoriety.
That makes a lot of sense. So maybe when you're thinking about getting into the kind of consultant-like space, if you can't afford to go, do the whole thing, maybe you get consultants that can help with the experience of a lobby day rather than just going with someone who can strictly manage schedules and then, kind of upgrade with time as you go. Perfect. So speaking of apps and technology.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a guy. I love toys. And there's always a new toy in the government relations world. If every company in D.C. that's in the government relations space, it seems, has an app, or they're going to have one by the end of the year for events like this, whether they be specifically for fly-ins or whether they're year-long programs used for any event over the year, whether they're in state, D.C., or elsewhere. They're fantastic tools because they allow you to get better access to your advocates, for your advocates to have better access to the information. You always will need to hand out pieces of paper, but this allows them to do things like get their schedules and just check their phone rather than having to find that piece of paper amongst those 50 other pieces of paper, or it's easier to find out if there's been a change in their schedule, to email a staffer the materials versus handing them a packet if that's their choice. There's 1,001 reasons to have a fly-in app, and there's a lot of companies that have them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting space because as a woman in technology who also likes toys, and just as a common, cell phone user, someone who has a smartphone, I will say that while there's an app for everything, you know, it can easily be overwhelming to download an app for your organization. So if you're thinking about getting an app for your organization, a great place to start is your Lobby Day app, because it can actually push adoption for your Grandeur app as an organization. Yep. So if you are starting to consider going mobile or improving your mobile experience, some things to consider are, is your actual advocacy site responsive? Will it work on mobile devices? Or do you have a point that you can start with to expand adoption of technology? A Lobby Day app or something small where your core group of advocates are going to be using it is a great place to start, because they can then advocate on the app's behalf for other users, which actually gets your ratings up kind of in app stores and things like that. There's a million things we could talk on about this, but I think the thing here to note is cell phones aren't going anywhere, and if you haven't considered an app, you should start.
Yeah. I mean, a couple more points to make. Just make sure that your app syncs with your data system. Mm-hmm. A lot of apps, to various degrees, do or don't. Some of them also allow you to, for example, or the companies themselves will pull down the data from the surveys that people do during their walking around.
Right.
So that when you're at that dinner at the end of the day, you can bring down all that data saying how many people are now going to sponsor, how many offices are going to support or neutral, so on and so forth. You can bring that up, and it's always fun for people to see that result of their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as I put down here, I've just spent days writing or translating paper surveys to Knowledgeous, and let's just say it wasn't the most fun experience because some people don't have very good handwriting. So this allows you to avoid some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make it a little bit faster so you can use the information more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the things to kind of consider on that as well is the adoption of new technology. So if you're interested in kind of the historic concept of, I think we'll call it geofencing or beacons or anything like that, anyone with a smartphone today is going to get something called push notifications, so that kind of white bar that comes across your phone and says, hey, look at this new thing that just happened from an app you have installed. If you are considering an app that doesn't have those, you need to consider one that does. That's definitely something that you need to be able to manage on a day-to-day basis as an administrator of that app during your fly-in day. Just like Andrew mentioned, to let people know that either A, your meeting time changed, or B, you know, you have something you need to remember. Oh, hey, here's the talking points just in case. All of those things are capabilities, and definitely don't fall for the vendor that doesn't give you those. So more things to consider. Also, for our engaged clients out there and for anyone listening, we are in process of thinking about mobile ourselves from a Lobby Day app perspective. So anyone interested, definitely feel free to contact us afterwards to talk further about that. All right, so some social media stuff.
So, yeah, you know, it seems like every presentation or webinar we have some facet of social media because of the great importance it has in the advocacy world. In my initial comments, I mentioned that Lobby Days are more than just a day. Social media is a prime tool for you to get your advocates excited, to build momentum, and encourage people that won't physically be at the Lobby Day to participate in the Lobby Day. One of the other things that we brought with us to the Hill was a petition which had over 75,000 signatures, and a lot of that was trafficked through social media as well as our email marketing. So we were able to connect some of those online activities with offline activities. You know, include social media information on promotional materials, websites, collateral. One of the other things that I've always found to be great on social media in icon form is to have quotes of advocates or staff talking about the issue. Make it personal rather than, you know, having your organization put off something as, you know, this is an organization that works in D.C., but having a real advocate from Madison, Wisconsin, from Erie, Pennsylvania, wherever. You know, coordinate social media. This is something that shouldn't be spontaneous where you decide that you're going to do something on social media. Tweet something out on your Lobby Day. Make sure that you have a hashtag. Make sure that, you know, that information is clearly outlined to all of your advocates prior to that. In all of your trainings and your support of your advocates, make sure that information is clearly relayed.
That makes a lot of sense.
And one other thing to toss in there is video is a very powerful, whether it's video or pictures, very powerful tool. And it's probably the most powerful tool you can have in social media these days. So don't ignore that, because everyone has a phone and they can take a video of themselves and make a message over 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that is important to have is command center, a central location where, you know, there's opportunities for advocates to get lunch or rest a little bit between meetings, where you can triage problems, have your decision makers and your executive team present, have stations for media opportunities, and just a general place to triage any problems. You know, where your advocate's lost, you can send a team out to find them on the Hill, but, you know, having a central location with phones, with internet access, with, you know, water and supplies like that is very important to have. For our past lobby day, we had it at the Florida House near the Supreme Court, and obviously with professional football players, we had floors of media and people going through the different stations for that. So.
Very cool, very cool.
I think this is something that some people don't really think about when they're planning a larger fly-in, especially in the House. But Hill offices don't like large groups. If you think about, everyone has probably been in a House office, for example. You've got the member's office, which may or may not be used. You've got the lobby area, and you've got the hallway or Rayburn or Longworth cafeteria rooms. Those are your choices for meeting rooms. You don't want to be in Rayburn cafeteria or Longworth cafeteria. You don't want to be stuck in the hall with people walking by in these huge groups. Hill offices want you to have a group, 2 to 4 people maybe, and then plus maybe one other person if there's a guide walking with them. Right. You know, and if Congress is in session, it's even harder because, especially if you're not able to meet with a member, that office is off limits. Right. So you're stuck in either the lobby or outside the office. And, you know, the noise really takes away from, and the distractions take away from the message. The last thing I'd mention is that larger groups mean that your advocates can't share their message the way it needs to be shared. They might be competing for time, they might be hurrying, they might decide just to not say anything at all because there's only so much time in that meeting. It's something to consider when you're planning larger groups. And if you get stuck in the Longworth cafeteria, for example, you lose time having to walk down there as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know logistics on the Hill can be something that's easy to do if you've done it for a long time, but it's never very simple to do because you're always changing location. So.
Fly-in events. Every fly-in has the breakfast, lunch, dinner, reception, something that's the hallmark moment for the public, for members of Congress, staff, et cetera. Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. Whether you have them on the Hill, whether you have them at a restaurant or somewhere flashy, let's say the museum. You have to consider whether you want a lunch or you want a reception or a full-fledged dinner. You have to, you know, there's benefits to each. Cost, you know, whether one is richer than the other. One, you're more likely to get more people, but at the same time, you're not going to get the message across in the same way that you can. Like a reception, you're not going to get your message across the same way you will at a dinner or a lunch.
Some people might attend the reception.
You get a lot more people at a reception. Yeah. You know, you have to also take a lot of pictures because it's a great opportunity for your advocates to meet with VIPs, members of Congress, senior staff, and allow them to get these pictures, which excites them. You can share those pictures later on. You can use those in your own social media. That's a picture from our fly-in. And you have to remember that you should pick your VIPs who are speaking beforehand, whether you know you have awards, whether you have a couple of people you're selecting from your own organization. Pick them out beforehand. Make sure they know the rules for speaking, very short, to the point, you know, so on and so forth, whatever your rules may be.
Gotcha. So speaking of events and awards, let's talk about my favorite thing, swag.
Yes. Swag is a lot of fun. Different groups take it to different levels. You know, going back, since I just was looking at their website, Alzheimer's had a great sash, very noticeable. I've seen fly-ins wear T-shirts, and I think it was last year one group did T-shirts, and you saw them everywhere on the Hill. And it was a T-shirt, so everyone, it's hard not to see that.
Yeah.
especially when the groups are flooded with a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
You know, you can bring gifts for the office as long as they are not violating ethics rules. You know, our folks brought small things like pins or pens with them to hand out.
Right.
Some
No
people, some people like to bring coffee mugs. Sometimes if you know a member's office, let's say a member of Congress has a coffee mug fetish, you can bring them a coffee mug because it'll be more memorable for that office. You know, the most popular thing I think I've ever seen, and we were talking about this earlier, was Aflac ducks. Everyone loves them, and there's something that people are going to put on their desk and remember.
Right.
So you need to figure out whatever swag you have is, one, noticeable when it's on your people, and two, if you drop it off and leave it behind, the members, staff are not going to just toss it in a pile and lose it.
Yeah.
Just make sure whatever swag you give your people to walk around the Hill with, that they're going to use. You know, some people don't like to wear hats. If you're with executives, they're not going to wear a T-shirt. Or if you're with if you're with doctors, for example, and they're going to wear lab coats, they might not want to wear a T-shirt. Or if they do, they're not going to see it because it's underneath the lab coat.
Right.
Things like that you have to consider when you're picking out your piece.
Makes a lot of sense. Definitely make it personal.
We went with the Where's Waldo scarves, the red and white rotating, and we had a lot of people come up to us. What group are you with? Where did we get one of those? And, you know, it stood out.
Yeah. What I like about the scarf, too, is it's kind of a little bit of a slight at football, since, you know, traditionally soccer is the scarf sport, so I like what you did there, but we won't talk too much about that.
So leave behinds, in addition to the swag that you might leave to the congressional office, you know, it's important to have infographics, information that's easily digestible, state or district level information. We had a packet of information that we left behind in each office, and Marin McGowan, our director of grassroots, did an excellent job in getting all of our advocates and the football players to do a personalized infographic that had their story on it. In addition to that personalized infographic, we had the infographic that you see there attached, the staggering cost of diabetes, which looked at it from a national perspective, and then we also had state-specific information there. Contact information, obviously, you have to include that. How do you find out more information on your issue? If you're a staffer, you know, the staffer has to prepare a memo for the boss, or, you know, make the decision and have those clearly defined information if you're the member yourself. So provide that information and be a continuous resource beyond the day itself. 3 to 5 pages in total. You don't want to burden them with a booklet of information because they won't read it at that point.
And again, make it graphic like this one here. No one wants to sit there reading a full page of text. They want to see something that they can look at quickly that catches their eye.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's nice here as well that you can, you know, the numbers are clearly called out, but the context is obvious. I don't have to guess what we're talking about.
So in terms of follow-up, you know, set a timeline. Tell the staff person yourself, would it be okay if I contact you in 2 weeks just to check in, give you some time to look over this information and answer any other questions. Make sure you thank the office that you visit, whether you're the advocate, the staff, or whoever attends the meeting. You know, have a thank you note. Sometimes personalized thank you notes that go in the mail, they take longer, they have to go through security. So send an email right away. If you want to follow up with a snail mail version, feel free to do that. One of the things that I did for my particular meeting was I took a photograph outside of the office, professional, with our professional football player and the staffer, and I sent that photo in my thank you message, so I knew that it was going to get read. You know, we also had our advocate, our football player, tweet that photo as well, but I wanted to make sure that they had it.
Very cool.
So, you know, set a date, answer any questions. Also consider scheduling a district meeting. You know, in August recess, that's a great time for you as an advocate if you're in Erie, Pennsylvania, or Madison, Wisconsin, to schedule a meeting or follow up with the member. You might get a member level meeting in your lobby day, or you might not. So if you don't, feel free to try and get one in August when the member's back at home.
That makes a lot of sense.
So, and then also, you know, meeting reviews. Get information back from your advocates and their experience and surveys and how you can improve, you know, what they liked about it. Did they not like the box lunches? Did they not like having to trudge through the rain from, you know, building to building? So, you know, definitely consider all of those factors when you're looking at the follow-up.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense.
You know, again, this goes back to the tech slide as well. Tech helps a lot. You know, the apps, the online surveys help a lot in getting people to actually do it between meetings and get it to you quickly rather than you having to collect things later on or hope they send it to you in email or snail mail.
Yeah,
and a follow-up event doesn't necessarily have to be an in-district meeting. We had a lot of our advocates, for example, say, come visit my dialysis center, or let me take you on a walk of the local organ, the transplant center, organ bank, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There are other things to do than just scheduling meetings in an office.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think also what you were saying with the app bit is, you know, once you start to rely on technology to run your advocacy campaign, at some point you're really going to need to consider all the different ways you can do that, or you're going to kind of get caught up in this half digital, half analog system, and it's going to take even more of your time. So definitely consider where you invest. All right, so we have some additional resources here on the screen that we'll send out for everyone just to kind of stay up to date on people who have done what we've talked about today as well as other places you can go to get information about how to run a lobby day, other best practices to talk about, people who've just done a great job historically online of helping their advocates do well during the lobby day and things like that. So we'll definitely send those around after our webinar today. So Josh and Andrew, I just want to thank you for your time. These are great resources. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk with us all. Lastly, for our viewers, if you have questions for Josh or for Andrew, feel free to go online to Twitter, #CQAdvocacy, and we will be happy to answer your questions, talk further about the resources, or catch up on anything that you missed and wanted to kind of probe into further. So we will, of course, always have more webinars for you over the next couple of weeks. Feel free to go to CQ Roll Call Connectivity and look at our webinar page to sign up for the next one. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.